my son said, but how do I know that the Bible is real, that the stories in it really happened? Because I wasn't there. He's 7. He said, I wasn't there, and how do I know? And so I responded to this actually with the framework that I learnt from Dr. Vodi Bockham. Many years ago, I watched a sermon of his on how can I trust the Bible. He has a very succinct summary that he uses, so I went through that summary. Now, the summary is, I choose to believe the Bible because it is a reliable collection of historic documents written by eyewitnesses during the lifetime of other eyewitnesses. They record supernatural events that took place in fulfillment of specific prophecies, and they claim that their writings are divine rather than human in origin. So that's the summary, and I dived into that with my son. I said, okay, well, I choose to believe the Bible because it is a reliable collection of historic documents. God has preserved his word throughout the ages, that we have reliable sources that give us a solid picture of what the text in its entirety was originally. And as far as history and historic documents go, there has been no more supported document ever than the scriptures. No other historic text has as much support as the Bible. So if we are going to say that we can believe texts from history, then we can believe the Bible as a historic document. Now, it was written by eyewitnesses. Why is that important? And I began talking about the Gospels. I said, okay, well, the Old Testament, God tells us that if we are going to charge, if we're going to say something against someone or for someone, if we are going to make a claim, then it must be supported by witnesses. And that is why it's significant that the New Testament starts with 4 witnesses. 3 of those accounts, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, all very similar but slightly different. Again, this is actually significant because it tells us that these are reliable documents, because when witness statements align perfectly, that's actually a sign that it's not genuine and that there was collusion. And so the differences are actually an important part of verifying their authenticity. This is how I had this discussion with my children. So I don't talk down to my children and try to skirt around things. My kids are very good at kind of going, okay, but what did you mean just then when you said that? And so I have these conversations quite in depth, and often their responses are very thoughtful. I would say also don't minimize the way that you're talking to your children. Just speak with them, get to know them, and listen to them. The number of times that my 7-year-old especially will bring up, oh, that reminds me of this Bible story or this verse. It does. That's so neat. And it becomes a sweet time where he's even able to encourage me with the scriptures. And that's beautiful. So dived into that, it was written by eyewitnesses, and it was written during the lifetime of other eyewitnesses. That's significant because, if I said, well, we had tacos for lunch, well, you 3 are witnesses. You were there, and we didn't have tacos for lunch. So you could say, well, no, that claim is actually not true. So it's significant that it was written during the lifetime of other eyewitnesses, because they could have refuted the claims, but they didn't. Now, they record supernatural events, things that we can't explain simply by the natural world around us. There must be some supernatural, a force outside of this realm that we understand through our, scientific research, thinking, all of those things. And then I went into some of them, and my son just starts going, what? I'm giggling. It was a lot of fun. And that these supernatural events took place in fulfillment of specific prophecy. So then I said, prophecy is when someone says something is going to happen, before it happens, and they say it exactly as it's going to happen. How could that be? If this wasn't from God, how could they know that detail? And I gave the example of Cyrus. It was like a letter was written to this man named Cyrus hundreds of years before he was even born. How can you write a letter to someone who's not even born yet and isn't even named yet? You can do that if you're supernaturally inspired, if you're moved along by God himself. And then finally, it closes with, and they claimed, the authors, that their writings were divine rather than human in origin, that they were given by God. And so that's how we know that the scriptures are reliable.